Welcome, everyone, to another episode of our Deep Dive podcast. I'm Hari, and as always, I am joined by my fantastic co-host, Kimi. Today, we are strapping on our virtual hiking boots and heading to the absolute roof of the volcanic world.
Hello, listeners. You are going to need those boots, Hari, because today we are exploring the majestic and honestly somewhat mysterious Nevado Ojos del Salado. Nestled right on the border between Argentina and Chile in the high Andes, this dormant complex volcano is not just your average mountain. It is officially the highest volcano on Earth.
It is also the highest peak in all of Chile, towering at a staggering altitude of 6,893 meters, or 22,615 feet above sea level. Just to put that into perspective, it is the second highest summit of the entire Andes mountain range, trailing only slightly behind Aconcagua.
And unlike the classic, perfectly conical volcanoes you might draw as a kid, Ojos del Salado is a massive complex. We are talking about a sprawling area of 70 to 160 square kilometers, composed of overlapping lava domes, lava flows, and over 20 different volcanic craters. It is practically a volcanic city.
A very dry volcanic city at that. The mountain sits incredibly close to the arid diagonal of South America. Because the conditions are so exceptionally dry, you don't see the massive, substantial glaciers or permanent snow cover you would typically expect at nearly 23,000 feet.
Exactly. Travelers and climbers have frequently described the surrounding region as a moonscape. But here's one of the most fascinating contradictions about this arid, desiccated mountain. Despite the lack of snow, it hides a permanent crater lake.
Oh, this is one of my favorite facts. Tucked within the summit crater, just east of the main summit at an elevation of around 6,480 to 6,500 meters, lies a lake about 100 meters in diameter. It officially holds the title for the highest lake of any kind in the world.
It is completely mind-boggling. The lake is fed by permafrost and snowfields, and it sits surrounded by fumaroles emitting sulfurous fumes. In fact, waters in a small creek flowing into this lake actually reach temperatures of 40.8 degrees Celsius or over 105 degrees Fahrenheit, thanks to the geothermal heat.
Nature's highest hot tub. Though with the sulfur fumes, it probably doesn't smell like a luxury spa. Speaking of the name, Kimi, Ojos del Salado has a pretty interesting translation and origin story, doesn't it? It does. The name translates roughly to salty eyes or salty springs. In Chile and Argentina, the word ojo, which translates directly to eye, is commonly used geographically to denote a spring or source of water. Another theory posits that it refers to massive mineral deposits on the mountain's flanks that resemble salty eyes.
There's also a historical tie. The name refers to the Rio Salado, or Salty River, which was used by a 1937 Polish expedition to reach the mountain. Though historians are a bit fuzzy on whether the local boundary commissions were already using the name before the climbers got there.
Let's talk about the geology for a moment, because this mountain has been busy over the millennia. Volcanism in the region started around 26 million years ago, but the Ojos del Salado complex itself began forming in the Pleistocene. It grew in two distinct phases, essentially building a newer volcano on top of an older one.
Right, it sits at the southern boundary of the central volcanic zone of the Andes. The shifting tectonic plates, specifically the Nazca Plate subducting beneath the South American plate, created the perfect mantle melting conditions. The last major eruption was actually a rhyodicitic event around the year 750 CE.
While there haven't been any confirmed historical eruptions, it isn't entirely asleep. Back in November 1993, observers witnessed columns of ash and steam over 2 days. And let's not forget those noisy fumaroles near the summit. Climbers in 1957 reported that with unfavorable winds, the intense emissions could literally suffocate people.
That definitely adds a layer of danger to an already grueling climb. But the bizarre features don't stop at toxic gas vents. Because of the intense solar radiation and sublimation of ice at that altitude, the mountain is home to giant penitentes.
For our listeners who might not know, Penitentes are towering, blade-like spires of hardened snow and ice. On Ojos del Salado, climbers as early as 1949 reported navigating through penitentes that were 5 to 8 meters high. Imagine trying to hike through a frozen forest of daggers that are 26 feet tall.
I think I would respectfully decline that hike. And underneath all of this, buried beneath the sand and encased in moraines, is a vast network of subsurface ice and permafrost. The melting of this buried ice creates sinkholes and pseudo-karst landforms, literally collapsing the ground from within.
It is a dynamic, ever-changing landscape. Yet, despite the hostile, freezing desert environment, where mean annual temperatures can hover around -10 degrees Celsius, life finds a way. Above 4,900 meters, vegetation pretty much taps out, but scientists have found lichens and mosses clinging to life near the summit. Even more incredible, they've pulled extremophile bacteria from the sediments of those high-altitude lakes. And on the animal front, while you might see ducks, flamingos, and guanacos in the lower valleys, researchers have found mice venturing up to 5,250 meters. They even found earwigs at nearly 6,000 meters.
An earwig at almost 20,000 feet is honestly a testament to biological resilience. Human history around the mountain is equally as fascinating, mostly because for centuries it was entirely ignored. It is hidden behind peaks of similar elevation, so it wasn't even properly identified for a long time.
Exactly. The Incas used the nearby Paso San Francisco to cross the Andes, but they never built shrines on Ojos del Salado like they did on other peaks. Even the Spanish conquistador Diego de Almagro marched right past it without a mention.
It wasn't until February 26, 1937, that Jan Alfred Szczepanski and Justin Wojtness, members of that second Polish Andean expedition we mentioned earlier, finally reached the summit. Tragically, a lot of their maps and original reports were lost during the devastation of World War II.
Which paved the way for some serious mountaineering drama in the 1950s. Kimmy, the altitude debate of 1955 is basically a mountain-sized soap opera.
It really is. An expedition from Tucumán went up a mountain they incorrectly thought was Ojos del Salado. They came down and boldly claimed it might be higher than Aconcagua, which holds the crown as the highest peak in the Western Hemisphere. The press went absolutely wild, treating it as proven fact.
That set off a massive international scramble. In 1956, Chilean, Argentine, and Austrian teams rushed the mountain. The Chilean party used a barometer to measure an elevation of 7,084 meters, and again, the media reported it as an absolute truth, completely ignoring how unreliable a barometer is at extreme altitudes with fluctuating weather.
The confusion was so bad that the American Alpine Club had to step in later that year. They faced terrible weather, and in a stroke of bad luck, a massive gust of wind actually stretched their measuring line, almost ruining the whole attempt to settle the debate.
I can just imagine them standing on the edge of a freezing volcano, fighting a hurricane-force wind, watching their tape measure stretch out like a rubber band. Ultimately, geodetic methods prevailed, confirming the height around 6,893 meters, firmly placing it lower than Aconcagua.
Today, it draws several hundred climbers a year, making it part of the Volcanic Seven Summits Challenge. Logistically, it's easier to approach from the Chilean side because you can actually drive up to a high refuge, though the physical climb is arguably simpler from the Argentine side.
But don't let the lack of vertical rock climbing fool you. It might not be a highly technical ice climb, but the extreme elevation, the bitter cold, and the relentless afternoon winds mean some sources suggest only about 1/3 of all attempts actually make it to the summit.
Those fierce winds, blowing up to 10 meters per second on the peaks, create massive fields of mega ripples in the sand and make walking upright a serious chore. Interestingly, the smooth, sandy stretches and lack of deep snow have made it a popular spot for something completely different than hiking: vehicle altitude records.
That's right. People have driven motorcycles, modified cars, and electric vehicles up the slopes. In April 2007, a heavily modified car managed to drive up to a staggering elevation of 6,688 meters, which is almost 22,000 feet. The idea of off-roading near the stratosphere is wild.
Beyond daredevils, the mountain has caught the eye of scientists for another profound reason. The unique crater lakes, the gullies, and the extremely dry, cold conditions have led researchers to study Ojos del Salado as a potential earthly analog for the environment on Mars.
It truly is an otherworldly place. From the highest volcanic ash to microscopic life surviving in a toxic, freezing desert, Nevado Ojos del Salado is a marvel of our natural world. And let's not forget, it's highly esteemed culturally too. The volcano is even depicted on Chilean passports.
It absolutely deserves the recognition. Whether you're a geologist mapping a buried caldera, an extremophile biologist, or just someone looking for the ultimate high-altitude off-roading track, this mountain has something to offer.
Well, that brings us to the end of our journey today. Thank you so much for tuning in and trekking up the salty eyes with us. Until next time, keep exploring and stay curious.
This episode is based on the Wikipedia article Ojos del Salado, which is available under the Creative Commons Attribution Share-alike license. This podcast was crafted using artificial intelligence.